The sun had barely risen when Emily Thompson left her apartment in Miami Beach that July morning. After 25 years dedicated to nursing at St. Luke's Hospital, her routine was as precise as the procedures she performed daily. As she drove along Ocean Drive, she watched the rough sea crashing against the rocks, a sight that always brought her peace before facing another intense shift in the ICU. "Lord, give me strength for another day," she murmured, adjusting the rearview mirror. In the reflection, her brown eyes revealed the exhaustion of sleepless nights, but also the determination that had made her one of the most respected nurses at the hospital. At 48, Emily carried in her gaze the experience of someone who had seen it all in her profession. From the joys of births to the sorrows of losses, every moment lived at the hospital had shaped her way of seeing life and death. As she waited, at the Queen Elizabeth traffic light, her thoughts drifted to Sophia, her most recent patient, a 19-year-old girl battling aggressive leukemia. "Mrs. Emily, you're different from the others," Sophia had told her the night before, gripping her hand tightly. "When you're around, I feel peace." The light turned green, and Emily smiled at the memory. She had always believed there was something beyond what the eyes could see, a spiritual dimension that transcended physical reality. But nothing in her decades of experience could have prepared her for what was about to happen. It all happened so fast. The sharp screech of tires, the blinding flash in the rearview mirror, the violent impact that sent her car spinning out of control. The world around her turned into a blur of colors and distorted sounds. Amid the chaos, a sudden thought crossed her mind. Is this how it ends? Time seemed to slow as her car spun down the avenue. Emily Thompson was aware of every second, of every shard of glass dancing in the air, of the smell of burnt rubber, of the metallic taste of blood in her mouth. And then, silence. An absolute silence, unlike anything she had ever experienced. When the paramedics arrived, they found her unconscious, trapped in the wreckage. "Multiple fractures, possible internal bleeding," shouted one of them, initiating emergency procedures. "We need to stabilize her now." But Emily was no longer there. Her consciousness floated above the scene, observing with surprising clarity the efforts to save her body. She saw the paramedics working frantically, the onlookers crowding the sidewalks, the silent sirens cutting through the traffic. It was like watching a movie in slow motion, except she was simultaneously the spectator and the protagonist. "We're losing her," the paramedic's voice sounded distant. "Initiating resuscitation procedures." It was then that Emily felt it. Gentle yet irresistible force pulling her upward, away from the earthly chaos. As she drifted away, an indescribable peace took over her being. There was no fear, no pain, only a deep certainty that something extraordinary was about to happen. The physical world faded behind her, earthly colors giving way to hues her human eyes had never beheld. Ahead of her, a light began to form. Not an ordinary light, but something alive, pulsating, conscious. And within that light, forms began to materialize, forms that defied any human description. "Emily Thompson," a voice reverberated through her being, not in English or any other known language, but in a language her soul understood perfectly. "Do not be afraid. You have been chosen to see what few mortals have ever beheld." The forms in the light became more defined, revealing beings she had only known through ancient scriptures, the Ophanim, celestial wheels covered in eyes, spinning in perfect harmony, the cherubim majestic in their multifaceted glory. It was as if all the knowledge she had about angels was but a pale sketch of the reality she now witnessed. Amid her awe, she realized her own being had changed. She was no longer bound by the limitations of a physical body. She was pure consciousness, pure light. She could feel the vibrations of the universe, the music of the celestial spheres, the cosmic dance of the stars. Every atom of the universe sang in perfect harmony, a divine symphony that made her heart, or whatever her essence was now, overflow with joy. "Why me?" her consciousness asked, not with words, but with the very essence of her being. The answer came not as words, but as a deep understanding that washed over her. Her journey was only beginning. What she was about to witness would change not only her life, but the way she understood existence itself. And so, Emily Thompson was led deeper into the celestial realm, leaving behind the world she knew, her broken body still being tended to on the sunny avenue of New York City. A new reality unfolded before her, a reality that challenged everything she believed she knew about life, death, and the universe itself. As Emily delved deeper into the celestial realm, the notion of time as she knew it ceased to exist. What could have been seconds or eternities merged into an eternal now, where past, present, and future coexisted in perfect harmony. The Ophanim, those magnificent wheels of light, spun in intricate patterns around her, creating a perfect geometric dance that seemed to hold all the secrets of the universe. "Come," the voice that was not a voice guided her. "There is much you need to understand." Before her, a being of light began to take shape. It was not like the earthly representations she knew. It was simultaneously gentle and majestic, familiar and incomprehensible. Emily Thompson instantly knew she was in the presence of Jesus, not the Jesus of paintings and sculptures, but the true Son of God in his celestial form. "My daughter," his voice resonated through her entire being, "you have always sought to see beyond the veil that separates the worlds. Now your eyes will be opened to behold truths that few mortals have seen." With a gesture that encompassed all of existence, Jesus revealed to Emily a vision that transcended her human understanding. She saw countless angels moving between heaven and earth, each with their divine purpose. Some were guardians, others messengers, and still others were warriors in a constant spiritual battle unfolding invisibly to mortal eyes. "Observe," Jesus indicated, and Emily saw her own hospital, St. Luke's, from a completely new perspective. In every room, beside every bed, there was an angelic presence. She saw how these celestial beings worked tirelessly, inspiring doctors, comforting patients, strengthening families. She understood that every whispered prayer was heard, every tear shed was noticed. "Sophia," she whispered, remembering her young patient. "Yes," Jesus replied, and the scene shifted to the room where Sophia rested. An angel of soft light stood by her side, its wings extended over her in a protective gesture. "The peace she feels in your presence does not come from you alone, but from the heavenly guardians who accompany her in her mission of healing." Emily Thompson watched in awe as the angels communicated with each other in a language of light and music, coordinating their actions with a precision that would make even the most sophisticated hospital seem chaotic by comparison. Every movement was part of a greater plan, every action had a divine purpose. "But Lord," Emily allowed herself to question, "why do so many people still suffer if there is so much celestial protection?" The answer came not in words, but in a deep understanding that poured over her like a river of wisdom. She saw how human free will was respected even by the most powerful beings in heaven, how each individual choice created ripples in the fabric of spiritual reality. The angels did not interfere directly, but offered guidance, protection, and comfort within the boundaries set by divine love. Jesus then led her to an even more extraordinary vision. Before her, the cherubim, beings with multiple faces and wings, formed a majestic circle. Each face reflected a different aspect of creation: lion, eagle, ox, and man, symbolizing the totality of nature under divine guardianship. "These are the guardians of the celestial mysteries," Jesus explained. "Through them, divine power flows to maintain the balance between the worlds." Emily felt small in the face of such majesty, yet at the same time complete, as if she finally understood her place in the grand divine plan. Every moment of her life as a nurse, every patient she had cared for, every sleepless night gained new meaning in the light of this revelation. "Your mission is not over, Emily," Jesus' voice rang, with authority and love. "So what you see here must be shared, not with empty words, but through actions that reflect the celestial reality in the earthly world." As she absorbed these words, Emily noticed that some of the scenes before her were beginning to blur, as if a veil were being gently drawn back. The presence of Jesus, however, remained clear and strong. "But how can I share something so grand?" How can I translate into human words what is beyond earthly understanding? Your testimony will not be just in words, replied Jesus. It will be in every act of compassion, in every moment of healing, in every silent prayer. The angels you saw will remain by your side, though your earthly eyes may no longer see them directly. The celestial forms began to dissolve into an increasingly intense light, but before the vision was complete, Emily Thompson received one final revelation. She saw how every human being was surrounded by a field of divine energy, how every life was connected in an invisible web of love and purpose. Remember, the voice of Jesus echoed one last time, the veil between worlds is thinner than men imagine. True healing begins when we recognize our connection to the divine. Vital signs stabilizing. A voice cut through the haze of Emily's consciousness. She's coming back. The return to her physical body was like plunging into icy waters after floating in the warmth of the sun. Every earthly sensation seemed amplified. The sharp smell of antiseptic, the rhythmic beeping of heart monitors, the metallic taste still lingering in her mouth. Her eyes opened slowly, trying to adjust to the fluorescent light of the surgical center. "Welcome back, Mrs. Thompson," said Dr. Richard, her longtime colleague at St. Luke's, now in the unusual position of being her doctor. "You gave us quite a scare. Your heart stopped for over 7 minutes." Emily tried to speak, but her throat was dry and sore from the recently removed endotracheal tube. Her eyes, however, conveyed a clarity that surprised the medical team. There was no confusion or disorientation typical of patients who had undergone similar experiences, only a deep serenity and a different glow in her gaze. During the following hours, as she underwent various tests and procedures, Emily Thompson maintained that same serene gaze, as if she could see something beyond the white walls of the hospital. The nurses whispered among themselves about how she seemed different, not just physically, but in her very essence. "You won't believe it," whispered Martha, a nursing technician, to a colleague during the shift change, "but when I went to check her vitals at 3 in the morning, I could swear I saw a golden light around her bed, and the whole room smelled like roses, even though there weren't any flowers nearby." The next morning, already in the recovery room, Emily received a visit from her younger sister, Beatrice, who had rushed from Chicago upon hearing about the accident. "My God, Emily!" Beatrice ran to hug her, careful of the various tubes and monitors. "When they called me, I thought that—" Tears wouldn't let her finish the sentence. "It's okay, Bea." Emily held her sister's hand, her voice still hoarse but firm. "I saw, Bea. I saw everything." "Saw what, sis?" Emily closed, her eyes for a moment as if searching for the right words. "How do you describe colors that don't exist on Earth? How do you explain the music of the celestial spheres with such a limited human vocabulary?" "Bea," she began slowly, "do you remember when we were little and Mom used to say that angels watched over us?" She had no idea how right she was. While trying to share fragments of her experience with her sister, Emily Thompson realized that something had fundamentally changed in her perception. The walls of the hospital, which once seemed so solid and definitive, now appeared almost translucent, revealing a deeper reality pulsating behind them. In a corner of the room, she could feel, more than see, an angelic presence. It wasn't as clear as during her celestial experience, but it was undeniably real. The angel seemed to be monitoring her vital signs in a way that transcended medical equipment. "Emily, are you okay?" Beatrice asked, noticing her sister's distant gaze. "I've never been better, Bea," she replied with a smile. "You know, all this time I've worked here, I thought I understood everything about life and death, but now—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Now I know that what we understand is just the tip of an infinite iceberg." At that moment, a nurse entered to change the IV. Emily watched her with new eyes, seeing beyond the mechanical gestures of the procedure. She could sense how every action, no matter how simple, had a greater purpose in the divine plan. "Rachel," she called the nurse by name, surprising her since they didn't know each other. "Your mother is sick, isn't she?" The nurse stopped, stunned. How do you know?" "Tell her that her prayers are being heard, and that the angel by her side right now has hair the color of the sun." Rachel dropped the syringe she was holding, her hands trembling. My mother. She always says she dreams of an angel like that. The rest of the day was marked by similar moments. Emily Thompson discovered she could perceive details about the lives of the people who visited her, as if she could read an invisible story written in the air around them. Each time she shared these insights, she felt she was fulfilling a small part of the mission entrusted to her. That night, when she was finally alone, Emily allowed the tears to flow freely down her face. They were not tears of pain or sadness, but of gratitude and deep understanding. Her hospital room, once a common space for recovery, had transformed into a sanctuary where the visible and invisible worlds met. "Thank you," she whispered into the apparent emptiness, knowing her words were heard by far more ears than humans could imagine. And then, as a silent confirmation, the scent of roses filled the room once more, and Emily knew with a certainty that transcended reason that her true journey was only just beginning. After a week of recovery that astonished the entire medical team, Emily was discharged from the hospital. Her fractures were healing at an inexplicable speed, and the tests showed no signs of the severe trauma she had endured. Dr. Richard, as he signed the discharge papers, couldn't hide his amazement. "In 25 years of medicine, I've never seen anything like it," he commented, adjusting his glasses as he reread the results. "It's as if your body is being healed by, well, something beyond conventional medicine." Emily Thompson smiled, knowing exactly what, or rather who, was behind her miraculous recovery. Throughout that week, she had been constantly aware of the angelic presences surrounding her, their healing energies flowing through her like a river of light. "Richard," she said, using her colleague's first name for the first time in all those years, "there are more mysteries between heaven and earth than our vain medicine dreams of." Before leaving the hospital, Emily made an unusual request. She wanted to visit Sophia, her leukemia patient. Despite the initial protests from the staff, who insisted she needed rest, something in her gaze convinced them to allow it. Room 507, where Sophia was staying, had always had a heavy atmosphere. The leukemia was at an advanced stage, and the latest tests didn't bring good news. But when Emily entered, still wearing her patient gown and leaning on a cane, something shifted in the room. "Mrs. Emily," Sophia exclaimed, her tired eyes lighting up. "You're alive, I prayed so much." Emily approached the bed, and for the first time since her return, she saw with complete clarity Sophia's guardian angel, the same one Jesus had shown her during her heavenly experience. The being of light stood at the head of the bed, its wings forming a protective canopy over the young girl. "Sophia, my dear," Emily sat on the edge of the bed, taking the girl's pale hands in hers. "God has a special plan for you." At that moment, something extraordinary happened. The touch of Emily Thompson, once merely comforting, now carried a different energy. Sophia gasped, feeling a pleasant warmth spreading through her weakened body. "Mrs. Emily, and what is this? I feel so light." Emily watched in awe as Sophia's guardian angel spread its wings, enveloping not only the patient but herself as well. The celestial energy flowed through her like a conduit, and she could literally see the diseased cells in Sophia's body being transformed. "It's the love of God, Sophia," she replied simply, as silent tears streamed down both their faces. For the next few minutes, room 507 seemed suspended in time. The scent of roses, which Emily now recognized as a sign of angelic presence, filled the air. The machines monitoring Sophia's vital signs began to register inexplicable changes. Dr. Paul, the oncologist in charge of the case, entered the room for his usual rounds and stopped, stunned at the sight. His terminal patient sitting up in bed with color in her cheeks for the first time in months, holding the hands of an Emily who seemed enveloped in a soft light. "But what?" he began to say, but the words died in his throat as he looked at the monitors. The numbers and graphs showed an improvement that defied all medical logic. "Dr. Paul," Emily said without taking her eyes off Sophia, "order new blood tests. I think you're going to be surprised by the results." In the hours that followed, room 507 became the center of a small revolution at St. Luke's Hospital. Sophia's new tests showed a dramatic reduction in cancer cells. The medical team took turns analyzing the results, searching for scientific explanations. for what everyone secretly already recognized as a miracle. "It wasn't you, was it?" Sophia whispered when they were finally alone again. "I mean, it wasn't just you." Emily Thompson smiled, gently stroking the young girl's thinning hair. "No, sweetheart, I'm just an instrument. But now you can see them too, can't you?" Sophia nodded, her eyes fixed on the corner of the room where the guardian angel stood. "It's so beautiful," she murmured. "Yes, it is beautiful," Emily agreed. "And this is just the beginning, Sophia, just the beginning." When she finally left the hospital that night, leaning on her sister Beatrice's arm, Emily knew her life would never be the same. The gift she had received wasn't just for healing bodies, but for opening people's eyes to a greater reality. "Are you sure you're ready to go back to work so soon?" Beatrice asked, concerned, as she helped her into the car. Emily Thompson looked one last time at the facade of St. Luke's Hospital. For a moment, she could clearly see the countless beings of light moving through the building, each fulfilling their divine mission. "More ready than ever, Bea. My true work is just beginning." Emily's return to St. Luke's Hospital, 2 weeks after her discharge, caused a quiet stir in the hallways. The rumors about Sophia's miraculous recovery had already spread throughout the hospital, creating a mix of curiosity, skepticism, and hope among staff and patients. "She came back different," whispered the nursing technicians during breakfast. "Did you see how the patients improve when she's around?" Dr. Henry Smith, the hospital's clinical director, observed the situation with growing concern. Trained at the most traditional medical school, he viewed anything that couldn't be scientifically explained with suspicion. That morning, he called an extraordinary meeting. "Emily," he began, seated behind his imposing desk, "you've always been one of the best professionals at this hospital. But these rumors about miraculous healings, this can't continue." Emily watched him calmly, noticing the guardian angel standing beside the doctor, his compassionate expression in the face of his charge's resistance. "Doctor." "Henry, do you remember your mother?" The doctor paled. "What do you mean?" "She appeared to you last night, didn't she? A dream so vivid that you can still smell the scent of her orchid garden." Henry stood up abruptly, his hands trembling. "How do you—" "That's impossible. I didn't tell anyone about that. She wants you to know that she's proud, and the orchids you grow on your balcony, the same species she loved, are no coincidence. It's her who tends to them while you sleep." Unexpected tears welled up in the director's eyes. Behind his rigid demeanor, Emily could see the boy who still mourned the loss of his mother. The guardian angel spread her wings, enveloping Henry in an embrace invisible to mortal eyes. "Emily," he said after a long silence, his voice softer, "what happened to you during those 7 minutes?" She smiled, sensing it was time to share her experience. Over the next hour, she recounted her journey through the celestial realm, the presence of Jesus, the revelation about the angels. Henry listened intently, his initial skepticism giving way to genuine curiosity. "I'm not asking you to abandon science," she concluded. "I'm suggesting that there are truths that go beyond what our instruments can measure." In the hallway, as she left the meeting, Emily Thompson encountered Sophia, who now worked as a volunteer at the hospital. Her recovery had held steady, intriguing. The medical team. The tests showed a complete remission of the cancer. "Mrs. Thompson," Sophia ran to hug her, "you won't believe it. Now I can see too. Not always, but sometimes. It's like a veil is lifted." Emily smiled, noticing how different the young woman seemed. A soft light emanated from her, similar to the one Emily now knew radiated from herself. "It's a gift, Sophia, and with it comes responsibility." Together they walked to the pediatric wing, where a new mission awaited them. Liam, an 8-year-old boy undergoing leukemia treatment, was in isolation after a sudden downturn. His parents, devastated, had lost hope. As they entered the room, Emily immediately sensed the spiritual battle unfolding. Warrior angels formed a protective circle around the bed, their swords of light raised against shadows trying to approach. "Sophia," she whispered, "can you see?" The young woman nodded, her eyes wide. It's incredible. And scary at the Same time, Emily Thompson approached the bed, her hands finding those of little Liam. The boy opened his eyes, a faint smile lighting up his pale face. "The angels," he murmured. "They're so bright." At that moment, Emily understood that her gift was not just for healing, but for awakening in others the ability to see beyond the veil. Sophia, Liam, and who knows how many others were being prepared for a new way of understanding reality. Dr. Henry, who was watching from the doorway, felt an inexplicable shiver as the scent of orchids filled the room. For a brief moment, he could have sworn he saw a golden light enveloping Emily, Sophia, and the little patient. Perhaps, he thought, there are indeed more mysteries between heaven and earth than our science dreams of. The news about the events at St. Luke's Hospital began to spread like wildfire. What had started as whispers in the hallways soon crossed the hospital walls, attracting the attention of the media and people in search of hope. Emily watched with concern the crowd that gathered daily at the hospital entrance. Entire families, some coming from other states, waited for a chance to meet her. From the window of her makeshift office, once a storage room turned into a consultation space, she could see not only the gathering of people, but also the countless celestial beings accompanying them. "This isn't how I imagined it," she confessed, to Sophia, who had become her informal assistant. "Each person here carries a story of pain, a hope, and not all of them will be able to be helped." Sophia, who in recent months had developed her own spiritual sensitivity, nodded understandingly. "But you're not alone in this mission, Mrs. Emily. Look." Emily Thompson followed the young woman's gaze and smiled. Through the hospital lobby, various points of light moved among the patients, other people who, like Sophia, had awakened to spiritual reality after coming into contact with Emily. "It's like a chain reaction," said Emily, recalling Jesus' words during her experience. "Each person touched by divine love becomes a channel to touch others." That afternoon, during one of her regular visits to the rooms, Emily encountered a situation that would test her gifts in an unexpected way. In room 302, Mrs. Constance, a 78-year-old woman in terminal condition, was accompanied by her conflicted family. "You can't let our mother die," demanded one of the daughters, grabbing Emily's arm as soon as she entered the room. "Everyone says you perform miracles." Emily felt the family's anguish, but also sensed something deeper. Mrs. Constance's guardian angel was positioned differently, its wings not in a protective stance, but in preparation. "Come here," she called the family, gathering everyone around the bed. "Look at your mother. Really look." For a moment, the light in the room seemed to shift, and everyone could see a soft golden aura enveloping Mrs. Constance. Her face, once twisted in pain, now displayed a surprising serenity. "Some miracles," Emily Thompson spoke softly, "are not about prolonging life, but about understanding its true meaning. Your mother is not alone. She never was." The words touched the family deeply. In the days that followed, Room 302 became a space of reconciliation and meaningful goodbyes. When Mrs. Constance finally passed away a week later, her family had learned a profound lesson about love and acceptance. The case had an unexpected impact. Dr. Henry Smith, who had closely followed everything, decided to implement significant changes at the hospital. A new wing was created, dedicated to palliative care, where the spiritual approach would be as valued as the medical one. "Emily," he called during a meeting, "I want you to train a team. People who, like Sophia, show sensitivity for this kind of work." The proposal was revolutionary, a program that combined traditional medical care with the spiritual dimension Emily Thompson had revealed. St. Luke's Hospital was about to become a pioneering center in a new form of medicine. "But how are we going to explain this to the medical board?" questioned Dr. Paul, still hesitant despite all the evidence he had witnessed. Emily Thompson smiled, observing the angels moving through the meeting room, their presence becoming increasingly noticeable to a growing number of people. "We don't need to explain everything," she replied. "Just show the results. Science and spirit are not opposites. They are two sides of the same divine coin." That night, after a particularly intense day, Emily found a moment of quiet in the hospital garden. The scent of roses, now her constant companion, mingled with the aroma of real flowers. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough," she confessed to the apparent emptiness, knowing she was never truly alone. In response, a gentle breeze blew, carrying rose petals that danced in the air in a way that defied the laws of physics. Emily smiled, understanding the message. Her mission was just beginning, and every person touched by her would become a new point of light in the grand divine plan. 3 months had passed since the accident that transformed Emily's life. St. Luke's Hospital was now known across the country as a center for holistic healing, where the extraordinary had become almost routine. But with growing fame came new challenges. That October morning, Emily woke earlier than usual. The sun had not yet risen when she sat on her balcony in Miami Beach, watching the first colors of dawn paint the sky. Her physical body had fully recovered, but she felt a different kind of fatigue, deeper and more profound. "It's not easy being a channel, is it?" Beatrice's voice sounded behind her. Her sister had permanently moved from Chicago to help her manage the increasing demands of her new reality. "Sometimes," Emily Thompson confessed, "I feel like I'm living between two worlds and not fully belonging to either of them." Breakfast was interrupted by an urgent call from the hospital. Liam, the boy she had helped months ago, had been rushed back with a severe relapse. Without finishing her coffee, Emily hurried to the hospital, her heart heavy with the news. On the way, she recalled the words Jesus had spoken to her during her heavenly experience. The true miracle isn't in the healing of the body, but in the transformation of the soul. Still, the possibility of losing Liam deeply troubled her. When she arrived at the boy's room, she was met with a scene that made her pause at the door. Sophia was already there, sitting by the bed, her hands gently resting on the young patient's. A soft light emanated from her, and the angels in the room formed a protective circle around her. "Mrs. Emily," Liam smiled when he saw her, his pale face lighting up. "Sophia told me she can see the angels now too. And you know what? I've been teaching other patients to see them as well." Emily felt tears in her eyes, not of sadness but of deep understanding. There before her was the true multiplication of gifts, happening in ways she had never imagined. "You know, Mrs. Emily," Sophia remarked later, during a break between treatments, "sometimes I wonder if Liam's illness has a greater purpose. He's touched so many hearts here at the hospital." The observation sparked an epiphany in Emily Thompson. She recalled her vision of the hospital during her near-death experience, how every life was interconnected in a divine pattern greater than human understanding. "Sophia," she said, holding the hands of her now apprentice, "I think I'm finally understanding. It's not us who make the miracles happen. We are merely privileged witnesses to a much greater plan." That afternoon, during a meeting with the multidisciplinary team, now integrated into the hospital's spiritual care program, Emily shared her newfound understanding. "Every person who passes through our lives," she explained, observing the attentive faces around her, "is both a teacher and a student. Liam taught me more about faith than I could have ever taught him. Sophia has developed gifts that go beyond mine, and each of you carries a unique light." Dr. Henry Smith, who was chairing the meeting, nodded thoughtfully. "You know, Emily, when all of this began, I thought we were merely witnessing extraordinary physical healings. Now I see that the true transformation is much deeper." After the meeting, Emily made her usual rounds through the rooms. In each bed, beyond the patients and their families, she could clearly see the angelic presences, some now visible to other members of the team as well. The hospital had truly become a portal between worlds. In a moment of stillness in her office, Emily closed her eyes and allowed herself to fully feel the presence of the celestial beings accompanying her. The scent of roses, more intense than ever, brought with it a renewed understanding of her mission. "It's not about me," she whispered to herself. "It never was. It's about awakening the light that already exists within everyone." The sunset found Emily Thompson once again on her balcony in Miami Beach, but this time her fatigue was mingled with a deep sense of peace. The weight of the light, she realized, was not a burden, but a privilege. And the more she shared this gift, the lighter it became. Winter arrived in New York City, bringing with it a series of unexpected changes. The spiritual care program at St. Luke's Hospital had become a model studied by institutions worldwide. and Emily found herself at the center of a transformation that extended far beyond the hospital walls. On a particularly cold July morning, as she walked through the hospital corridors, Emily noticed a different kind of energy in the air. The angels who usually roamed the halls seemed more active, moving with an unusual urgency. "Mrs. Thompson," Sophia ran up to her, her eyes shining with excitement. "You need to see this, in the hospital chapel." Without waiting for a response, Sophia led her to the small chapel on the hospital's ground floor. As she opened the doors, Emily stopped, awestruck. The small space was completely transformed. Waves of golden light pulsed across the walls, and at the altar, a familiar presence awaited her. "Jesus," she whispered, immediately recognizing the divine energy that had embraced her during her near-death experience. "My child," the voice resonated not just in her ears, but throughout her entire being. "The time has come for a new phase in your mission." Sophia, by her side, could also see and hear everything, as could the other 5 people present in the chapel, all patients or staff who had developed their spiritual sensitivity over the past few months. "What is happening here is no coincidence," Jesus continued. "This hospital has been chosen as one of the portals for the great spiritual awakening that is approaching. But with this gift comes great responsibility." Emily Thompson felt a shiver run down her spine. Images began to flow through her mind. Hospitals in different parts of the world, all connected by a network of golden light. In each of them, people, like her and Sophia, served as bridges between the physical and spiritual worlds. "But Lord," she questioned, "how can we be prepared for something so grand?" A smile of infinite compassion illuminated Jesus' face. "You have been prepared from the very first moment. Every person who has passed through your lives, every healing, every tear, every moment of doubt, it has all been part of the preparation." Dr. Henry Smith chose this exact moment to enter the chapel. His eyes widened at the supernatural scene, but instead of his usual skepticism, his expression was one of pure awe. I can see," he murmured, tears streaming down his face. "After all these months, I can finally see." Jesus turned to him with love. "Science and spirit have never truly been separated, my son. They are merely different expressions of the same divine truth." In the hours that followed, the chapel at St. Luke's Hospital transformed into a modern-day sanctuary. Staff, patients, and visitors were inexplicably drawn to the place, and many experienced the opening of their spiritual vision for the first time. "It's as if a veil is being lifted from everyone's eyes," remarked Sophia, marveling as she watched people enter skeptically and leave transformed. Emily Thompson now understood that her accident and near-death experience had been just the beginning of something much greater. St. Luke's Hospital was not just a center for healing, but a hub of spiritual transformation that would soon connect with others around the world. "But how are we going to manage all of this?" she asked Jesus, feeling the weight of responsibility. "Do not be afraid," he replied. "Just as the angels work in perfect harmony, you too will find your rhythm. Each person who awakens to this reality will have their unique role in the divine plan." Before the vision ended, Jesus shared one final revelation with them. The time of divisions was coming to an end. Medicine and spirituality, science and faith, the physical and the metaphysical, all false separations would begin to dissolve in the face of a higher understanding of reality. "Remember," were his final words as the light began to soften, "you are never alone. The angels you can now see have always been here, and they always will be." As night fell over New York City, news of the event in the chapel had already spread throughout the hospital. Emily, exhausted but deeply at peace, gazed out the window of her room at the city lights. "It's only the beginning, isn't it?" asked Sophia, who remained by her side. "Yes," replied Emily Thompson, smiling as she saw the countless points of angelic light now dancing over the city. "It's just the beginning." Emily Thompson from St. Luke's Hospital. This is from the University Hospital of Chicago. The phone call came on a Wednesday morning, 6 months after the revelation in the chapel. "We have a situation here, something only you can understand." Emily listened carefully to the Chicago doctor's account. A 7-year-old girl in a coma for 3 months following an accident had begun emitting a golden light visible even in photographs. Even more astonishing, other patients on the same floor reported visions of angels and intense spiritual experiences. "It's not me you need," replied Emily, smiling as she saw the messenger angel who had just appeared in her office. "In fact, you already have someone there who can help." That same day, a nurse at the Chicago hospital, Celia Johnson, discovered she could see and interact with celestial beings, just as Emily had predicted. It was the beginning of a network of portal hospitals, as the medical centers where the intersection between the physical and spiritual became increasingly evident came to be called. At St. Luke's Hospital, the transformation continued at a rapid pace. The old chapel had become a center for spiritual studies, where doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals learned to integrate their spiritual sensitivity into medical practice. "It's fascinating," commented Dr. Paul during one of the study sessions. "The more we open our minds to this reality, the more we realize it has always been here. The diagnoses become more accurate, the treatments more effective." Sophia, now the coordinator of the spiritual training program, had become a respected mentor. Her own journey, from a terminal patient to a spiritual healer, inspired everyone who knew her. "The most important thing," she explained to the new members of the program, "is not to develop special powers, but to awaken to a broader awareness of who we truly are." On a particularly busy afternoon, Emily Thompson was urgently called to the ICU. A terminally ill patient, Mr. Joseph, was having an extraordinary experience that affected everyone around him. Upon entering the room, she found a scene of profound beauty. Angels of light formed a celestial corridor, and Mr. Joseph himself seemed to float a few inches above the bed. "He is seeing the other side," Emily whispered to the present team, "but this time we can all see it too." Indeed, every person in the room, doctors, nurses, family members, could witness the supernatural phenomenon. The veil between worlds was thinner than ever, and Mr. Joseph's transition became a moment of deep transformation for everyone present. "How is this possible?" asked one of the resident doctors, tears streaming down his face. "It's as if heaven and earth were meeting," Emily completed, "and that's exactly what's happening." That night, gathered with her closest team, Emily Thompson shared a new understanding that had been growing in her heart. St. Luke's Hospital was not just a center for physical and spiritual healing, it was a model for a new form of society, where the material and spiritual dimensions coexisted in harmony. "Look," she pointed to the city through the window, "each light you can see now represents an awakened consciousness, and they are multiplying." Indeed, throughout the city, ordinary people were beginning to report extraordinary experiences. Children were being born with a natural spiritual sensitivity. The elderly were reclaiming long-forgotten ancestral wisdom, and even animals seemed to respond to this new frequency of consciousness. Liam, now fully recovered, had become an especially bright point of light. His regular visits to the hospital brought joy and healing not only to the patients, but to everyone who crossed his path. "You know, Mrs. Emily," he said during one of his visits, "the other day I dreamed of Jesus. He showed me a completely different world, where everyone could see the angels, just like we can now." Emily embraced the boy, recognizing in his simple words a profound truth. Liam's dream was not just a dream, it was a glimpse of the future unfolding before their eyes. As night fell over New York City, Emily contemplated the city from her balcony in Miami Beach. The scent of roses, now familiar to so many, filled the air. The lights of the angels danced among the buildings, becoming increasingly visible to a growing number of people. "It's as if the whole world is awakening," murmured Beatrice, who was watching the scene beside her sister. Emily smiled, knowing that this was only the beginning. The great revelation that Jesus had promised was coming to pass, not as a single, dramatic event, but as a gradual and profound awakening of human consciousness. Exactly 1 year had passed since the accident that had transformed Emily, and through her, so many other lives. St. Luke's Hospital, once a common medical center, now radiated an energy that could be felt even from a distance. On the surrounding streets, people stopped to contemplate the golden aura enveloping the building. now visible to almost anyone who looked closely. On that special morning, Emily Thompson woke before sunrise, called by a familiar presence. Ondi. Her balcony, the Ophanim, the celestial wheels that had first welcomed her into the spiritual realm, danced in intricate patterns in the early morning air. "It is time," they said without words, their lights pulsing in perfect synchronicity. At the hospital, she found Sophia, Liam, Dr. Henry Smith, and dozens of others already gathered in the chapel, as if they had all received the same silent call. The air vibrated with an energy unlike anything they had ever experienced before. "Something is different today," said Liam, his eyes shining with a wisdom that transcended his age. "It's as if the sky is closer than ever." No sooner had he finished speaking than the presence of Jesus manifested, more tangible than in any previous appearance. This time he was not alone. A multitude of celestial beings accompanied him, filling not just the chapel but the entire hospital with their light. "My beloved," his voice resonated in every heart present, "the moment for which you have been prepared has arrived. The veil between worlds, already so thin, now dissolves completely." Like a wave of light spreading from the hospital to the city and from the city to the world, a new awareness awakened in every human being. Suddenly, what was once visible only to a few became a shared reality for all. In hospitals around the world, similar scenes unfolded. The network of portal hospitals that had formed in recent months now served as anchor points for this global transformation of consciousness. "Behold," Jesus gestured, and all could witness an extraordinary vision. The earth seen from a celestial perspective, wrapped in a golden web of light, connecting all living beings. Emily Thompson watched in awe as each person present began to understand their unique role in this new reality. Dr. Henry Smith, the former skeptic, now radiated the same light he once only saw in others. Sophia, his first apprentice, had become a master in her own right. And Liam, the little warrior who had survived leukemia, emanated an ancient wisdom that was only now fully revealing itself. "What happens now?" someone asked. "Now," Jesus replied with a smile that lit up every heart, "the true journey begins. What you have experienced so far was merely the preparation for the new era that is now unfolding." Emily then understood that her near-death experience a year ago had not been solely about her personal transformation. It had been the first step in a collective transformation that was now reaching its fullness. "Each of you," Jesus continued, "is a guardian of this new consciousness. There is no longer separation between the physical and the spiritual, between science and faith, between the healing of the body and the healing of the soul. All is one." The rising sun sent its first rays through the chapel's stained glass, creating a spectacle of colors that blended with the celestial light. Outside, people began to gather, drawn by the extraordinary energy emanating from the place. "Mrs. Emily," Sophia approached, tears of joy in her eyes, "do you remember when you told me there was more between heaven and earth than we could imagine? Now everyone can see." Emily embraced her apprentice, feeling in that moment all the love and wisdom she had received throughout her journey. The scent of roses, which had once been her personal signal of angelic presence, now filled the entire city, a celestial fragrance marking the dawn of a new era. The miracle, she finally understood, was never about making the extraordinary happen. It was about awakening to the extraordinary reality that had always been here. As the day progressed, St. Luke's Hospital became the epicenter of a spontaneous celebration. People of all ages and backgrounds gathered, sharing their own experiences of awakening, recognizing in others the same divine light they could now see within themselves. Emily Thompson, observing everything from her special place in the chapel, felt a deep peace. Her individual mission had been completed, transforming into something much greater. The veil between worlds had dissolved, not just for her but for all of humanity. "Between heaven and earth," she whispered, recalling the title her story had been given, "there was never truly a separation. We just needed to learn to see with the eyes of the heart." And so, on that historic morning, a new page began to be written in the story of humanity. A story where angels and men walked side by side, where miracles were recognized as the natural order of things, and where divine love manifested freely through every being. St. Luke's Hospital, which had witnessed the beginning of it all, would remain as a symbol of this transformation, an eternal reminder that when the veil of illusion dissolves, what remains is only the truth of divine love, uniting heaven and earth in an eternal dance of light and purpose.